Live should be here. I'm gonna check the YouTubes. Everybody, this is Stephen Kirby, promoter and owner of MPX, local to the DFW area. And have you always been in the Dallas area, Stephen? Okay. Okay. Born and raised. That's cool. Yeah, I'm from Dallas, so whatever people ask me, say, where are you from originally? I say, no, Dallas. Uh, a lot of transplants to the area. So, okay, so you've been running MPX for 10 years now. Uh, where, how did it get started? Like, yeah, run us through that part. Okay. Sounds about right. Sounds about right. Uh, yeah. Oh. Uh, yeah. Oh, okay. Mm-hmm. Yep. Yep. Yeah, that first start is always kind of rough. But I think your approach of it is always really going to be really important. Like, you sounds like a student of the game. Like, let's get through this. You're always learning. I always like talking about earning your black belt the old-fashioned way is putting on a white belt and you wear it until it's dirty, like until it becomes black, and that's the mentality. So that's cool. So were you always when you started in PX? how'd you get your storylines going? Like, what was that start like? Because it was a whole new, it's an introduction. Like, what was the first night like to getting everybody out there? Okay. Mm, okay. Give me. I'm sorry. Interrupt you real quick. Apparently, we're having audio issues, and so I'm trying to figure this out. Give me one sec. I'm gonna stop recording real quick because I was recording as a backup because I started doing that, which is I learned to be a smart thing to do. Let's see. Yeah. Yeah. So your audio is really weird. So I'm gonna. Because you're coming up on here completely fine. Sorry, I'm just talking through this problem. Live somewhere, which is fine. It all works out. So we were talking about the start of your storytelling in MPX. So you were saying that it was mostly dated, single of it was self-contained, right? So you beginning and end, you have everything wrapped up.
Yeah, I mean, and again, a lot of that has to do with the time, right? Like if you're running a show today and then you don't run another show for a month, you can't expect everybody to remember what happened a month ago, right? People have other things going on. They're watching other shows. They're keeping track of things like that. That's why like TV shows and stuff come out every week, and not every month.
That's true.
Um, so trying to run storylines um, when you're doing that sort of thing is really difficult. And so we tried to do that. We tried to combat that by like making things kind of self-contained. We had rivalries, but I
Okay.
don't know that they would necessarily equate to stories, right? It was this guy's fighting this guy because he beat him last week, last month,
Okay.
and that sort of thing. But and those are really easy to remind somebody, right? Like, yeah, you cut a quick promo. Hey, you beat me last month, and I'm coming for you, kind of deal. But what we do now is so different because we have video production, we have the network that
Yeah.
allows people to keep up on stories, and we're weekly. So for our weekly audience who's there every week, like you don't have to do as much to remind them because they know who we are. Uh, they like who we are. They like what we're doing, and so they remember. I've had people remind me of stories that we've done in the past that like I'm like I don't even remember that. Like it sounds really cool. I'm glad we did it. Um, but it's so different now, especially since we're weekly and we have all these additional things that help us tell stories. Because that's the hardest part, right? It's just continually trying to make sure you, as the audience, understands what we're doing, and we always have to take into account that somebody in the audience wasn't there before, right? Whether it's they haven't been there in a year, they haven't been there ever, they haven't been there in 2 weeks, and you have to account for those people. And if you don't, then you lose
Hmm.
uh, some of that value that any of that story has.
Yeah, it's I've been there occasionally, sporadically, and I always had an idea like I don't know the nuances of the beef, but I understand who's beefing with who, to what degree, and how that's all panning out. So it all yeah worked out really really well. It's and I can see when I came back, certain characters grew and certain alliances were different or certain things were working out. But I was like, oh, kind of neat. You can see it grow throughout the years. So let's talk. How many people do you feel is in your stable storyline that kind of has been going on for year to year? Like, how do you I imagine it's been growing, but like, what's the average?
For sure, yeah. Because like since we've been in the new building, which is about 4 years, we've had 300 different people work for our organization.
Wow.
In 4 years. So, and some of that is like one-offs, right? Like we had X-Pop come in. He's been there one time. But so I think our core group of guys is probably somewhere in the 20 to 25 range of people that like are there fairly consistently, at least once a month, that sort of thing, or who have had long running stories in the past. And there's certain guys that'll come in and they'll run a long running story and then you won't see them again for 2 or 3 months. And then they come back and they're only a once a month guy.
Okay.
The advantage to all of the talent and people in Texas and in DFW specifically is that we have that option, right? As people get more popular and or just want to grow themselves as a performer and they start going to other promotions and things like that, you don't get that opportunity anymore because those people are now, their Saturdays are taken somewhere else. And that's the other negative that you have with stories is you have to have everybody's availability. If you want to run a storyline that runs for 6 weeks, and one of the guys that you want in it is only available for 2 of those days, well, that story gets scrapped or it gets changed completely or a different guy takes his place.
Yeah. Okay.
And since nobody works directly for us, right? Like we don't own contracts on anybody or anything like that. Everybody is an independent worker. That's kind of one of the positives about independent wrestling is this guy won't let me wrestle, so I'm going to go wrestle for this guy.
Yep. Works out for everybody.
Everybody that doesn't want to do stories, right? Because in our case, it happens all the time. We'll come up with this really cool idea based on a guy's character or based on where we see the audience is going, and so we'll have this really cool idea, and we'll call the guy, and he's like, yeah, man, I can't be there until December. It's like, well, great, now nobody's going to care, and so our really cool idea gets nothing. And not only that, but like injuries, sicknesses, stuff like that. COVID, happens, and all of a sudden, like every cool idea we had is now gone because somebody tears an ACL and you're in the middle of a story. We had a faction warfare at one point. Okay. We had these two warring factions that are going back and forth to each other, and I catch grief for this all the time for this thing dying out. But what nobody understands is what happened in the background is like people on both sides of the aisle got hurt, or were sick, or wanted to stop working with us for one reason or another, and all of a sudden, like, you got 2 guys in a faction on either side, and it doesn't make any sense. So the storyline died with no resolution, which sucks for everybody involved, but there's nothing we can do about it.
Yeah.
And by the time everybody's healthy and happy again and ready to go, well, it's been 6 months. So now nobody cares about the resolution. And, and that's one of the things that nobody ever sees and nobody ever thinks of when you're talking about like an independent level. You don't have that luxury, right? The guys that work for WWE or AEW or TNA, like if they call you and tell you you're at tapings, you're at tapings. Yeah. You don't get to tell them no. We've had guys cancel on us before that we were going to bring in because they were like, hey, TNA booked me that date, or AEW booked me that date. So, hey, I'd love to come do your independent show, but I can't because my real job is calling me.
Yeah, because those AEW have kind of a loosey-goosey contract, right?
Some of them do, right? Some are exclusive, some aren't.
That's what it sounds like. Some of the guys are kind of loosey-goosey.
Yeah, and TNA's always kind of been that way. Okay. And like WWE has like some really weird rules around it, and like you can work for specific places if they know you well enough and things like that. There's all sorts of weird rules about it that it's easier just not to deal with it, which is why you don't see WWE guys work independents other than like Evolve and things like that, the stuff that's directly correlated to the company.
Oh, okay, interesting.
But like, but everybody else. But again, if TNA calls them and says, "Hey, we need you that date," they cancel those things because that's where their real money.
So yeah, your storyline gets a little borked.
Yeah, and that's why, and I, we were kind of talking about it before the call. That's why, like, most of the time when you're bringing a guy in, you're not bringing him in to plug him into a storyline spot, right?
Okay, yeah.
And one of the things that we always do is we make sure, like, we generally try and have 2, 3, sometimes up to 4 stories kind of running concurrently. But we run in 7 matches on a card, which means you have 3 or 4 matches on a card that are really just there because you need to fill out a card, right? And most people aren't going to remember 7 stories, right?
Yeah,
and that'd be difficult anyways. And so sometimes you just like, oh man, that's a cool match. We'll do that. And then sometimes you get those kind of self-contained stories in a show of something happens at the beginning of the night and it plays out throughout the day. And so you get to kind of play with that because not everything is loaded down on the card with necessarily
deep stuff,
an end goal. Right, yeah. It doesn't all have to be deep, right? The depth helps us and it sets us apart from other companies and things like that, but it's not it's not 100%, right? And it couldn't be 100%. If you watch Raw or SmackDown or Dynamite or anything like that, they run storylines, but not every match is a storyline match.
They move around. Sometimes it's self-contained. It's I always likened it, and I heard people talk about it's like a three-ring circus. Like, if you don't like the clowns, you can wait for the trapeze artists, you can wait for the tamers. Like, there's a lot of different things. And if you, especially for you, because you run a weekly show now, if you mix it up every week, if the audience keeps coming back, they get a different flavor every single time. And it's, like, kind of fresh every single time. So you're not doing the same storylines or same characters every single week, because then it's, like, we see it on the mainstream product. It gets tiring. You're like, okay, I've seen this before, nothing new.
Yeah, it's the whole, like, John Cena, Randy Orton 75 matches in a row that happened years ago.
Yeah.
Because they were all phenomenal matches, but by the time you're on 35, it's like, okay, what else?
Yeah. I feel
that's.
I was gonna say I feel the same problem with, because I follow the MMA and UFC, because they have so many events and the guys get hurt, and then it's like you can't run these things anymore. Now you're digging deep for really shallow. Because, yes, MMA or UFC wanted to be the best fights, the best tournament style kind of thing, but they've been injecting way more storylines into it, so you don't get that same kind of pop, For sure, yeah, and they're, because they're trying to, they're still, MMA as a mainstream product is still kind of trying to find its legs and its audience, and what do we do, right? Like, you get some of the boxing purists that come in and they're like, okay, this is kind of a step up. And then you get some of the wrestling purists who are like, okay, it's kind of a step down. And so, like, they're constantly trying to figure out that mix of what makes sense. And, then you get guys like Conor McGregor, who is clearly just 100% a showman and can back up everything he says. And he's a guy that, like, catches, like, my attention, right? Because I love the theatrics. I love the shit talking. I don't know what I can say. There's I forget, they always says there's a difference in the UFC. There's fighters and prize fighters. There's, like, martial artists and then there's prize fighters. So guys like Dan Hardy, GSP, they're more martial artists. Like Rory McDonald, they're martial artists. They just want to fight the best or challenge themselves and move forward. And then there's guys who are now like Connor and then Masvidal and Diaz were like, no, we want the best, biggest money match. We want Mayweather money, because Mayweather has, like, the sweetest deal. He gets a cut of everything.
Yeah, and I mean, look, if I'm gonna get punched in the face and have stuff broken, I want you to pay me as much money as you possibly can. So if I can make you more money by going in and talking with my crazy Irish accent and screaming at everybody, 100%, that's how I would do it. I think Conor McGregor is a genius, other than the fact that his job is to get hit.
It's really smart, like how they worked out. Really smart. I heard, similar to Mayweather, he has a financial team that looks at the economic impact of his fights. So he'll look at hotels, Ubers, restaurant numbers in the city around the week where he fights. So he can show, this is the impact I make me this kind of money. And so that's part of his negotiation process. Because I imagine this is similar in the WWE and, like, pro wrestling. You look at what's moving, what sales are, who to put forward, because who is connecting. I remember back in the day, it was what signs got brought. Like they look at the signs and look at the in the audience. How many T-shirts are out there? Like especially when like NWO and Stone Cold, you look at the audience like how many 316 shirts are in the audience. Oh my god.
Yeah. Merchandise plays into that big. That's why nowadays guys get cut of their merchandise and things like that. But that's a great way to tell how somebody is doing. And would be a great gauge on the independent level if anybody actually controlled or contributed merch on a regular basis.
Yeah,
right.
That's the hard part.
It's hard to order 250 T-shirts for a guy, and you never know when you're going to see him and when you're not. So you can't. We have a hard time tracking somebody else's merchandise sales. You just have to kind of be like, you look at guys as they're coming in. And you're like, okay, that guy's wearing an Andy Dalton shirt, and that guy's wearing a whatever shirt, and like, okay, we know those guys are popular, cool.
Yes, that's what I heard about MPX. That was astounding that people are seeing local shirts, like people are wearing local merchandise. It's not just all the mainstream stuff.
Yeah, and it's cool because we've got a great partnership with a company called Lolly Boo. Gonna screw that up. Lolly Boo Creations, and she does T-shirts for a lot of the guys and does amazing work and has great turnaround.
That's cool.
And so that makes it so much easier when you have somebody who's doing that and working with your company, because now you do get a little bit more foreknowledge and you kind of see who's investing in themselves and and who's getting a return on that, because people love it. People love shirts and buying shirts and buying merchandise of the guys.
It's like being into, especially local stuff. I feel it's like being into a really cool secret but you want to tell everybody. Yeah. It's like, I found this gem. I want to show everybody, especially when everything looks dope. You know what I mean? I remember there was a run of T-shirts where it was, you can tell they just churned it out and it just didn't resonate. Right. When the merch resonates with the character, you're like, and it looks cool. You have to have some sense of design of what people are wearing in the streets, to make it really people want to wear on. Like, it looks like a band. It mostly looks like rock shirts, to be quite honest.
Yeah. And you got to be really careful too, especially with wrestling shirts, because there's still a little bit of a stigma around wrestling. So if it looks like a wrestling shirt, like you put a big wrestling ring on it, people are less likely to buy it, right? The most popular shirt I ever had, I had a tag team partner named Baby D, and together we were Punch Drunk Love, and there's all the shirt was 3 emojis in the middle. It was a fist, a beer, and a heart, and it said Punch Drunk Love underneath it. And we sold gobs of those things because they looked like something you could wear anywhere. They were simply designed. It wasn't like wrestling is cool all over it and things like that. And so people bought them, and we made a ton of money doing it. It was great. It really worked out the way we needed it to.
I always think about it as like, I need to take this design to like a farmer's market or a Trader Joe's, and just, if anybody walking by, that's my audience. Or if it's kind of edgy or kind of wicked looking, I go to like a rock concert or that kind of stuff, depending on who you're trying to tackle, audience wise. I was gonna ask you, so has there any been somebody where you had the opportunity or really wanted to bring in for like a one night, but you just couldn't figure out how it would work out logistically, or with somebody in your crew?
Yeah, I mean that happens a lot, right? The process to try and bring somebody in is probably easier now than it ever has been with Twitter and Facebook and social media and things like that, because you can reach out to somebody
directly.
Years in the past you had to have somebody's phone number or an email address or whatever, but logistically it's still very difficult because you run into like I said, TNA's got them that night, especially running on a Saturday night. It's a very popular night for wrestling. So most of the time, if you want to book somebody, you're talking about, okay, well, it's May now. Like, hey, what are you doing in September? Because I'll use Joey Ryan as an example, because we've had Joey Ryan in a handful of times, and every time we reach out to Joey Ryan, it's like, okay, you're booked until September. What can we have in September? And he'll give us a September date, and we'll plan for it. And as we get closer, we'd start buying plane tickets and things like that. And most of the time, it works out. But every once in a while, we'll get to that point, and he'll be like, "I got to be in Japan that week," or
Yeah.
whatever. Like, that those sorts of things happen, especially when you're trying to plan something that's 4, 5, 6 months away.
Everything's
Um,
the industry is so loosey goosey. It's flexible.
yeah, and again, that comes from us all being independent contractors, and that's how guys make money doing this, is because you can kind of play people against each other, right? Like, okay, I can go take this X amount of dollar booking here if nothing else happens. But if somebody comes in and offers me 4 times as much money, or a trip to Japan, or to England or whatever, like, yeah, I'm gonna take that. And so as a promoter or an owner or whatever, you have to kind of understand that that's how it's going to be. And not everybody comes to you and says like, "Hey man, I'm going to take this other booking." They most of the time they're like, "Something came up, da 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 da," which is why we wait to buy plane flights. It happened with Brian Kendrick. The one time we brought Brian Kendrick in the old building, we had him all set up. We had a plane flight bought. Everything was great. We had him sending in promo videos and everything else. And he called us and he was like, "Hey, I'm going to go be part of this tournament in Japan, and it's the same weekend that you have me. What can we do?" And so I called the airline, and their airline's like, "Too bad, nobody cares."
Airlines.
And so, to his credit, Brian Kendrick totally was cool. He was like, "Look, schedule another date. I'll pay my own plane flight. And we'll reduce the rate." And we kind of made it work out where like everybody kind of made money off of it. And he was a super nice guy, totally fun when we had him in. Had a great match for us, and that's one of those things. Like it was a weird situation, and it all worked out.
Yeah, you have that liberty as the owner. You got to be flexible. It's part of the industry. Everybody's an independent contractor, and you got to work with it. But that's cool that you guys worked it out.
Yeah, and it doesn't always work, right? Like we've had some people in the past who we had some dealings with, and then all of a sudden they go radio silent, and you never hear from them again, and you'd already made the announcement, and so you just kind of quietly like, that didn't happen, and that sort of thing. And so like, so it's a big game, and it happens, and I've seen it happen to other people way worse than it's ever happened to us. We've been very lucky, and we do significantly less fly-ins than most other people do. Part of that is because we are weekly. You can't pay to fly somebody in every week. It's just not economical, because first and foremost, this thing's a business, which I feel like a lot of people forget. Especially like right now, right? We're still paying rent on a building we're not using. We're still paying water and electric and internet and security and all these things for a building that we're not using. And so while having our own building has the advantages of having the ring up all the time and being able to do kind of whatever we want, it also has some major drawbacks, especially right now. So
yeah, who would have guessed?
Yeah. That weird times.
Yeah. I was going to ask you, at what point, the belt, at what point had you made the belt happen? And was it from the very get-go, like we're going to have a championship belt, or was that something that came, I was like, we should probably have this and then move forward?
So I had a little forethought of going in when we first started this. Okay. It was, because the internet, while social media wasn't as popular 10 years ago, there were like message boards and things like that. And so you could see the things that people complained about when people were talking about independent companies. And one of the major things is like, oh, they don't have their own belt, or they're using toy belts, or, these sorts of things, right? And so we had a belt day one, first show. Right on. Wasn't a very fancy belt. It was, I think it was made out of I think it was a copper plate, and it was on, black leather, and I think, it may have cost $200, and it was, it was chintzy, but it was ours, right? It said our name, and if you polished it up, it looked kind of goldish. And so, and then, throughout the years, we've actually gained numerous titles. We have tag titles now. We have our Prospect Championship. That's cool. We actually have our Addicts Championship, and the main title has gotten an upgrade. So it's one of those things that like things have grown and progressed. We just revealed a new Addicts title, probably about 6 months ago, which is a real pretty belt. The main championship has been around for about 4 years now.
Okay.
The updated one of the main championship. So the tag belts and the prospect belt are still kind of old and a little outdated now. So that's on kind of the list of things to do. And we were headed that direction until everything kind of shut down. So hopefully once we're back up and running, we'll continue to make those upgrades.
So with each belts, how would you come up with the names and the reasons behind that, like the prospects and the attic belt?
The prospect belt was difficult, and it was the first one that we added aside from the tags, right? Because tag's easy. Mm-hmm. 2 people, tag match, cool, tag team belts.
Yeah.
But the prospect belt was one that we kind of argued about back and forth because we wanted what people call a mid-card title. Okay. Like the IC belt or the US belt. But I've always been very aware of what MPX is, right? Like we don't call our belt a world championship because it's not defended throughout the world. It is the MPX championship because it is defended at MPX. And so when we were talking about our mid-card title, we didn't want to do something goofy like Intercontinental or US or even something like like we weren't on YouTube, so we didn't want to call it the YouTube belt. We nowadays we could probably do something with online streaming and things like that. But prospect came because when you're in the NFL and you go through the combine, you're considered a top prospect. And what it means is that you're kind of the next in line, right? Is you are showing enough potential that we are impressed enough that you are the next in line. And so that's really what the prospect title became, was you are on the fast track to getting a shot at the MPX championship. And the rules have kind of evolved around the prospect belt, where it works very much like kind of a combination to lead to an end of the Money in the Bank briefcase that WWE does.
Okay.
So as a prospect champion, if you defend the title 4 times and you successfully defend it 4 times, you can then cash in that belt at any time for a chance at any other title.
That's cool.
And so it's a different concept. It gives a little bit more credence to what the prospect championship is about. And it, again, going back to your story motif here, is it allows us to play with that story, right? Mm-hmm. Oh man, this guy's got 3. Is he going to make it to 4? Is he going to challenge? Oh man, this guy's got 4. He's going to challenge, but win. Oh, he's got 4 and he challenged. Is he going to win? Is he going to lose? Yeah. And so we have all these opportunities to play with what somebody's going to do once they become that champion.
Okay.
And it really gives us an opportunity to play with it.
It's a great device. That sounds cool.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. In fact, the first show that we're having back, hopefully May 23rd, Prison Break, the winner of the Prison Break match will become the prospect champion because the prospect championship has been vacant since the last person cashed in and did not win the X championship. Because once you cash it in, it's gone.
It's gone.
And then it goes up in some sort of tournament or match or whatever happens to happen around that time. Then we have a new prospect champion that comes out of it. So if things go well and we get to have Prison Break on the 23rd, that match will be kind of one to look for because it will determine who's kind of next in line and where that goes. And so that's. It's a lot of fun to be able to use that and tell those stories with it.
That's really neat. And what is with the Addict belt?
So the Addict belt was the genesis of it is we started running shows on Friday nights for a while, and to have some value in our Friday night shows because the Friday night shows were about young guys, right? Okay. Unproven. Maybe they hadn't been on the main roster yet or whatever. So come out and watch these guys who just got done training or who are new to the area or whatever. Come out and watch them. And so to add some additional value to Friday nights, we decided that we wanted to introduce a belt there. Okay. And since our fans are, we've coined them addicts. It was actually coined by one of our fans, but our fan page on Facebook is MPX Addicts. Most of our shirts revolve around some sort of, oh, we're addicted to wrestling or addicted to MPX or things like that. And so the MPX Addicts Champion became, it was a fan vote at
Oh,
first. It was a fan vote to see who got into the tournament, who was going to, vie for
yeah.
the Addicts Championship. And so it really is, and really has kind of become our fans' belt of, this is the belt that, like, if you're the fan favorite, that's the one you want to go for. That's the one that's going to put you in the eyes of the fans as theirs, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's very similar to when The Rock was the people's champ
Yeah.
and things like that. A lot of people have used it as that kind of same concept is I am now your champion. And it really plays off really well. And I actually held the Addicts title for a significant period of time, and it was a ton of fun. Just being able to connect with the fans on a completely different level because our fans have accepted it as kind of their belt.
Mm-hmm.
And we ran a storyline earlier this year where when we got the new Addicts, the new belt,
Okay.
we had somebody destroy the old one.
Oh.
Um, and he was very much public enemy number one for a very long time because he did it. Because I mean, he went in center of the ring, took a hammer to the old belt, just beat the crap out of it. After beating the crap out of me. So it was really a fun story to tell because everybody was like, that what indie company is going to destroy a belt? It's one thing for WWE to throw, the
Mm-hmm.
Smoking Skull Championship into the East River. Like, okay, well they'll just make another one. Um,
Yeah, for real. I've been in a live events trade show industry in Mexico. Their trade shows are built and burned. They
yeah,
come in, they build the booth, and then afterwards they just trash the whole thing and they're out. I was like, nothing's reusable. I was like,
yeah, because
wow.
it's sometimes it's just easier, right?
Yeah, it's just easier. So has some people what's expendable to some it's like why would you do that? But that's knowing that at the indie level, that's the reaction you would get. It's like that's an indie belt. Like they spend money that they can't just get it. But they
Yeah,
had another one. That's pretty
yeah,
good.
yeah. So it was a lot of fun, and it told a really good story, and really like helped both myself and the guy that I was in the program with. I mean, we both grew as performers and characters out of it. Uh, in a way that we couldn't have done if we hadn't have run that story, right? We would have just been two guys that fought for 4 weeks in a row for no reason,
Yeah.
or 6 weeks or 7 weeks, however long it was. But that element of the story helped us prolong that story and make it better and make people care in a way that otherwise they wouldn't have.
That's true. So I was gonna ask, um, what's a gimmick match you've been wanting to use but you haven't found the right place for it yet?
Cage match.
Oh, okay.
Our building is just not
Oh,
designed for
yeah.
it. The old building probably was,
Mm.
but the problem with cage matches on an independent level is somebody has to set up the cage,
Yeah.
right? So generally your staff is not well equipped to do
Mm-hmm.
that. Every indie show I've ever been to where they've had to put up a cage, you generally end up with a 45-minute to an hour-long intermission as
Oh,
they try and put up the cage.
yeah.
And that's a lot to ask for an audience to sit through because you're now waiting around for an hour with nothing to do because you can't put on wrestling during it because they're building the cage around it.
That's true.
One of my favorite stories, and I'm going to tell it really quickly, is I was in South Carolina, and they had a cage match,
Okay.
and it took them forever to build the cage, and so they sent a guy out, and he was cutting a promo, and so this guy's on the stage prior to the ring, and he's pacing back and forth as he's cutting this promo, and he slips and he falls off the edge of the stage and goes into all the production equipment, tears out the computer, the microphones, the audio equipment, just pulls out every light they have. I mean, just destroys their production. So every bit of work that they're doing to try and get the cage up so they can get it on camera so they can do all these cool things is ruined because this guy just missed a step
Oh my
on a
god.
stage. And it was just like in the moment it's horrifying. Afterwards it's so incredibly comical.
Yeah.
Uh, because it was just one of those moments you're like, this literally can't get any worse.
I remember because I was in the live events industry and it got to the point where we had to just look at each other like it's just a trade show. No one,
Yeah,
no one died.
yeah. Nobody's gonna die today.
So we're okay because he went to go visit a helicopter manufacturing plant and it's like we have to be strict because if we mess up, a helicopter falls out of the sky. We're like, okay, yes, that is why you were that strict.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's probably something to be worried about.
I totally get it, but yeah, I can see that it's you. The momentum of the night is really key. So have you always been the time frame you use now? Have you flexed with it? Tried different things?
So we on occasion we do, right?
Okay.
One thing that I'm a huge stickler on is we start on time.
Mm-hmm.
You could probably count on one hand. We've ran, God, I can't even tell you how many shows we've ran. Hundreds at this point.
At this point.
You know, we've probably been late 5 times, maybe,
Oh, wow.
right? And I'm talking like we started at 8:05 instead of 8.
Oh, wow.
And
Okay.
even then, I'm in the back like screaming because it's 8:04 and nobody's out there.
Oh, wow. It's good.
Because to me it matters, right? Like if I tell you we're gonna do something at 8 o'clock and you don't see me until 8:15, I'm an a-hole, right? Like that's just how I've always been. Also, if I tell you that I have plans at 10 o'clock and I need to be done at 10 o'clock and we plan for that and then you keep me until 11:30, now you're an a-hole. And so I'm very, very particular about we start at 8. We try and end no later than 10:30. Most of the time it's 10. Every once in a while it kind of breaches into that 10:30. It's very rare that we're pushing anywhere past that. We'll cut things before I'll keep the audience there longer.
Yeah.
Because I think that's important, right? It is one, we run on Saturday nights, so people have other things they want to do. They want to go to the bar, they want to eat, they want to do whatever. So if you get done at 10 o'clock, you still have time to go do other things if that's your choice. Not only that, but like 3 hours of a live wrestling show is really hard to do. If you've ever been to a WrestleMania or something like that, you can feel the energy in the crowd by hour 2. Like everybody's like, "Oh, hey, I'm kind of done. I've cheered, I've booed, I've had all these emotional roller coasters that I've really enjoyed."
Recently,
But I don't
those
give.
guys, they go like 5, 6, 7 hours.
I know.
That's a marathon. That's a long day.
It is, and like those guys got there at 7 o'clock in the morning for that thing to start at 5 o'clock, so they're exhausted by the time they're going on at 11:30.
Yeah.
And so all of these factors play into it. So I'm a big fan of the 2-hour indie show. We've done some 3-hour ones. We do a Texas Rumble every February that sometimes is gone. I think we did that one time as a 3-hour show. We've got our anniversary show in August, Purple Rain. That sometimes is a 3-hour show because it's a big show.
Yeah, I can see that.
So we've done it on occasion, but I really like that 2-hour time frame. There's something about it that just feels right. And it seems like we keep the audience engaged and that they're happy from start to finish. And that's what's important to me is that you don't walk out of my building going, well, I never want to do that again. Because I pride myself on being, somebody who if you've never watched wrestling before and you come watch an MPX show, you're probably going to enjoy it. You may want to come back, right? I've never had anybody show up and be like, well, this is stupid. I never want to see this again, right? There's people who don't come back for reasons, that somebody made them mad or, they don't like me, whatever, right? There's plenty of reasons for somebody not to come back to our show. But I don't think anybody's ever been like, well, that completely sucked and I never want to see it again.
No, I can see that.
And I think that's important, right? Because if you bring somebody, if you're a big wrestling fan and you bring your buddy who's not a wrestling fan and they hate it, like you're not going to want to come back.
That's true.
And so like if you're only killing 2 hours worth of somebody's time, they're probably going to be a little less irritated if they didn't enjoy it, right? And if you're there for 5 hours, you're going to want to strangle your friend who took you by the end of it, and I want to avoid that.
Yeah. I've been dragged to a couple of events, and I was just like, oh, I didn't realize this was going to be this long.
Yeah.
Like, this is going to be a marathon. I gotcha.
Yeah, that 6-hour wedding that I didn't want to go to. I never want to go to another wedding. That's fine. Great.
So throughout the night, how do you book it? So what's the ebb and flow you're looking for when you have a night? Because I know it needs to, you can't drain your audience too quickly, or that by the end of it they're done way too early. So how do you manage that?
For sure, yeah, and a lot of that, I got smart eventually, and I hired a booker
Okay.
who does a lot of that now. So I'm gonna speak to what I know,
Okay.
and that's being smart about the flow of it. Right, we generally have 7 matches a night,
Okay.
which means you have 4 before intermission, you've got a 15-minute intermission, you have 3 afterwards. Your more important stuff is generally more
Mm-hmm.
towards the tail end, right? So your championship match is probably going to be the main event, unless there's a spectacle, right? A Joey Ryan or a Tommy
Okay.
Dreamer or something like that, and then they might take that spot if they're not wrestling the champion. To me, my first match is always, or what I always want it to be, is something that's very action packed, right?
Okay.
Two littlest guys in the room who are going to do the coolest, flippiest stuff. I want those guys to be first. Our audience, our doors open at 7:30. We have people who start camping outside as early as 6:30 on nights, right? They're out there tailgating,
Yep.
whatever they're doing, right?
Yep. I seen
But
it.
that means they've been there for an hour and a half by the time our show starts.
Okay.
So if I've waited an hour and a half for my movie to start, I don't want to start with a big dialogue scene, right?
Gotcha.
So I want the first match to be as crazy as humanly possible, and really get them up and excited for it. Then you can kind of taper that back down, right? Because you want all that energy to come up, but if all you ever do is go up, like you said, you're gonna wear them out, right? So you want all that energy to come up, and then you want to kind of like level them out. Second match, maybe they're gonna go get some popcorn, maybe they're gonna go to the bathroom, whatever. They're gonna go outside and have a cigarette, whatever's gonna happen. So that second match, you want something that's probably a little less storyline
Involved. Yeah.
involved, right? Maybe something that you're giving somebody a shot to see what they're going to do. Maybe you're trying a new character. Maybe
Okay.
maybe it's a brand new person on the show, something like that, right? Like you're going to have some bit of a lull there, and maybe that's okay, right?
Yep.
So then, so as you start bringing them down, then you start bringing them back up. Then you get a really high excitement point right before intermission. That way, they're all go to intermission going, man, we really want to go back because we want to see what's going to happen next. Intermission, you kind of have another one of those kind of like slow build matches where maybe in the beginning it's a little slower, just simply because people are still coming in from intermission, they're finishing that cigarette, they're still in line for the bathroom, whatever. So you're going to slow it, you're going to kind of slow roll them back into it, and then depending on where your main event is and how up you need it to be, you might have a little bit of a dip before it, something that maybe is a little more fun.
Oh yeah.
And not so storyline driven, right? Like it's a good time for a comedy match, or maybe just a character that everybody loves or something like that, because you want them to hold on to that emotion until you get to the main.
Yep.
And
Okay.
so it really is, and if you talk to anybody in wrestling for long enough, you hear us all talk about the roller coaster, and that's really what it is, right? Is it's you want them to travel on this big emotional roller coaster through the 2 hours that they're there, and that means that some points are going to be slower, and some parts are going to be, some parts are you're ticking up that track, right? And you've got to wait for that big emotional downfall, and if you don't have that, then you can blow up an audience really quickly.
I've been told about that through storytelling and comic books, and how certain areas you want to, and even as a graphic designer, where things are visually dense, where things can breathe, and when the audience turn the page or turn the product, this area is for them to like take a moment, their eyes to take a rest before you hit them again with more things. So it's always been, you have to understand at that point you really have to understand your audience, and as growing up as a fan of pro wrestling, you know what you like, so you just kind of have them running through, and you've been through shows too as a fan and probably as research, which I feel sometimes when I go out it's hard to really fanboy out, because I'm always looking at like, how are they doing this, what's going on here, looking backstage. I went to the UFC event, I just kept eyeballing like, all right, there's the camera people, there's Esther, there's Ariel, there's all the reporters. But you just kind of like taking the whole ambiance of it.
Yeah, it really, being inside of anything, it really takes you, it becomes harder to be a fan, right? Like I haven't watched wrestling as a fan in so long, because I'm sitting there and I'm like, oh, look at that little thing, and da 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 da. and it drives my wife crazy for sure because she's a big wrestling fan, but she will get into it, right? Like she's all like, no, there's Sons of Guns and things like that, and I'm all like, yeah, but he did this and he dropped his back foot and he shouldn't have, and it drives her crazy because I can't, I just don't have that. The one time a year that I get it is the Royal Rumble.
Yeah, I can see it.
There's something about that I can still watch that and just be totally engrossed in everything that happens and not try and watch it from some weird technical.
Yeah,
I'm trying to learn everything I can.
I seen, what was it recently in AEW? They, with the Liberians, they took all these weird, which supposedly could have been gaffes, and they built it into a storyline. I was like, that was super smart.
Yeah.
Take all that like random beef footage and just put it together into something. I was like, that's really cool.
Yeah, and sometimes mistakes and things like that can lead to great ideas, and you just have to have somebody who's willing to kind of go out there and try it. And that's one of the things that I love about our booker is he constantly tries to figure out how to make the best out of whatever situation has occurred.
You have to in the industry, like you said, it's injuries, people's schedule changes, coronavirus. You gotta be flexible because it's live and things especially when you start the show, it's you can't stop it. You're moving forward.
Yeah. I mean, we had a guy knock himself out in the middle of a match one time. No. I say he knocked himself out. He took a bad bump and he kind of ended up punching himself in the face, which is hilarious. You can watch it on slow motion, but like I'm the first guy out of the curtain, right? I'm there's a match going on, a referee goes down. I'm in the back, like, what is he doing? Somebody comes out, tells me he's hurt, so I bolt, and I end up, I'm the first one in the ring. We've got an ambulance called, and all this crazy stuff is happening. And for a moment, like the wrestling just doesn't exist, right? Because at the time, it's like, all right, well, that's my friend, and he's hurt, and so we got him out, and we got him in the ambulance, and he was fine, and, got him checked out and things like that. And then by the time I got him in the ambulance, like my match was up. And so, like, we get everything settled, and then, like, I hear my music, and I'm like, all right, well, cool. Well, now time to go be Stephen Kirby, wrestler, and walk out and start drinking whiskey and spitting everywhere. And so, like, it's so weird how quickly you can kind of switch between the things because, like you said, life happens, and that is what it is.
Yeah, especially as the owner, you're backstage taking care of everything.
Yeah.
Cool. So let's wrap this up. We're gonna run a little bit of an hour today. I'd love to have you back. This is awesome. Just digging deep
anytime
into all the little details. So what do you guys got coming up? Like, what are you working on right now?
So May 23rd, with any luck, as long as the governor of Texas continues to allow it, we will be at 25% capacity. So we're going to sell about 40 to 45 tickets.
Okay.
Which will be the Prison Break match, which is a kind of a fun 6-man match where we let people go every 2 minutes and they join the match. It's very Elimination Chamber wise, very indie level of it, but it's always kind of a fun match to see, and we've got a lot of cool stuff that's going to happen that night. I don't think we've announced anything yet, so I'm not going to. But a tag team match that I've wanted to see for a very long time is going to happen that night if everything goes well. So if you're one of the 45 people who are going to buy tickets, you should as soon as you can. They're going to go on sale May 18th. Okay. And we're going to try and live stream this event as well because we know we're at limited capacity. So we're trying to work with our streaming partner right now to get our live stream up. So you'll be able to pay $15 day of the event and still watch it from home if you couldn't buy a ticket.
Okay, cool. It's that quick pivot, right? Everybody's trying to figure out. Thankfully, we have all these tools that are available to us, and a lot of them are like super plug and play. To be quite honest, like the software I'm using to broadcast now is free, and so it's like, okay, cool. It's something new to learn. Yeah,
for sure. Yeah, and this whole quarantine thing has kind of made all of us kind of reach beyond what we were doing, and maybe that'll be a good thing.
It's a moment of growth, hopefully.
For sure.
Cool. So I have your links that I sent you, and they're down in the description below. Come find MPX. If you're local to the area, I highly encourage you to go. If you just want to, have you never been to an indie show? Go to an indie show. It's great fun.
Yeah, and right now, if you go to our network and use the code Help Me, you actually save 50% on 2 months worth of subscription service. So it ends up being like $4.99,
Oh,
and you can
cool.
watch everything for like the last year and a half. Plus, there's specialty matches. I think the X-Pac match is on there. There's a bunch of Joey Ryan on there.
Oh,
There
that's
might even
awesome.
be an Ember Moon match or two on there
Ooh.
from back when she was Athena here in the Texas Indies. So
I remember being there, seeing her in the old gymnasium. Like everything got
yeah,
moved, and I saw her move. I'm like, oh, she's good. Like I
yeah,
can just tell. I was like, this is gonna be cool. And I was never able to get back, but now she's Ember Moon. It's amazing.
absolutely.
Cool, cool. So let's goodbye, everybody. See you
All right, thank
around.
you.
Thank you.